Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones, and this is Dane.
Hello.
He's my brother, my older brother, not oldest brother. That's suspenseful.
Actually, the name of the ringtone is suspenseful.
Oh, okay, well that works. Yeah, so Jesus has been on the podcast. He was one of the first people on the podcast. And this is Dane, my other brother. What do you do right now?
Right now, I work 2 jobs, and I'm about to start school back up again. I work at the Meat Market Factory, which is the first and only fine dining restaurant in Oklahoma City that's all organic and all scratch kitchen. I wait tables and I bartend there. I really like it. It's fun. And then I'm also a low reed and drum major tech for Edmond North High School. Just help their marching band with their, obviously, low reeds, which includes tenor saxophones, bass saxophones, bass clarinets. And I help their drum majors, which is the guys who conduct.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and hopefully they know that too. I kind of gave an explanation for that in my first podcast. But what are you going to school for?
I'm going to school for music education, instrumental music education. I want to be a band director. In all reality, I actually want to be I want to do all grade levels of grade school, that is. I want to be able to do elementary music. I want to be able to do middle school, beginning band. I want to be able to do high school marching band and concert band. And eventually I want to be able to get my master's and do college band. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I want to be able to get my doctorates and be a contracted conductor for wherever in the world that will take me.
That sounds really cool. But also kind of difficult nowadays, especially here in Oklahoma, given obviously the cuts in funding. I have a friend that was a elementary music school teacher, and he worked in Bartlesville, but basically since something about high school assistant director, they were switching around positions, and since that was his first year teaching there, they just kicked him off and put the assistant band director on his job. And so since he didn't have any, it was his first time teaching there. Yeah, they just put someone else on his job, and so he was just left without a job. That's and right. I feel like it's kind of scary how those things seem to be, that you can know a lot of people and sort of have an in that way, but if you're kind of new and fresh, then there's not really a place for you.
Well, yeah, that tenure and that seniority does play a lot into it, but at the same rate, there's still a teacher shortage anyway, so if your friend isn't against looking out of Oklahoma, then he'll easily find a good paying job that'll keep him around for a while.
Yeah. How do you see yourself? I mean, where do you want to be after you graduate?
After I graduate, I would honestly like to move, because as we already said, it's not really a viable option to teach in Oklahoma, and where is really not of a huge importance to me, honestly, because the important things to me is that I want to be able to make a decent amount of money. I mean, obviously enough to survive. I want to be able to have a school around where I could get a master's in conducting and maybe be a grad assistant, especially just for the summer, so if it'll help pay for my tuition. Yeah. And really that's about it. Anywhere that that the pay for a teacher is enough that I can live on my own and
go to school and continue your degrees.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, It's kind of hard to think because, and I mean, obviously I'm not as into that as you are, but for the extent that I was majoring in vocal music ed, there's a lot of, like, personal, like, everybody knows each other, like, sort of teacher things.
Yeah, no, in that realm it makes sense. But there's a lot of professions that are that way, and teaching especially because, well, anytime there's a vacancy, they ask other teachers that teach that field, and they expect them to know other ones. So it's not just we go to school together, but we also are kind of relied on by our peers to know each other.
Yeah. And then what is it about music or teaching music that made you go, this is what I want to do?
Well, it's kind of the age-old reason that everybody says for teaching, but it's so substantial that, to me, I don't really need another one, although I have plenty. It's the aha moment. It really, there is something so beautiful about seeing people, especially music students. That's a really big one. Seeing music students get cross a certain threshold or achieve a new high that they hadn't done before, and that's really great in lessons. And I could just be a private lesson teacher, but when you get that in a piece of music that you as a director picked out, that you are a really big fan of, you put it in front of your kids and they struggle with it and work and then they do all they can, and then eventually just something clicks and they just have reached such a higher level, and you cut off and it's in the room. Everybody can feel what happened, that we as a group have evolved.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like that in the universe. I've done lots of things, I feel like, in my life. Being only 22, obviously, I'm kind of ignorant for saying that. But as far as the things that I've done in my life, there's nothing greater than that.
Yeah, there's something, like, really awesome that... because it's funny because I hadn't really thought about it from the teacher's perspective until you mentioning at least that example, the piece of music that about picking a piece that you really enjoy, because, you know, in retrospect, like, I remember just being given the music and just like, what's this, and just discovering it and then learning to love it and sort of learning what the teacher sort of intended. Yeah.
and that's, you know, that really, it happened with us specifically because we had that kind of a teacher that just knew her stuff so well and knew what she liked and put stuff in front of us that she wanted us to play specifically. Yeah. But the sad part about a lot of directors is that they don't consider the group that they have, or either they don't consider it enough and then put something in front of them that's too hard or too easy or just doesn't spark anything within them. Yeah. Or on the other side of the spectrum is that they think about it too much and then think about, oh, well, we have a really strong saxophone section, so we're going to do something by Granger. Or we have a really good trombone section, so we're going to do something by Wagner. And then in doing that, they do the same mistake that they would by not thinking about it enough, and they take away the children's experience, basically. Yeah. The possibility of doing something bigger. Although, I mean, having a program with Granger and Wagner is really not something I'm going to go against at any point in time.
Sure. And I mean, I always think, and no, like, personal things against at least our band director, but I, like, personally enjoyed choir much more than band. And maybe the difference being not so much in the fact that I was singing instead of playing an instrument, but the way that the room was interactive. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The harmony of it all. Sorry, I had
pun intended. in that, like, I felt like I was actually contributing, maybe because there were smaller sections or whatever, but
from the singer's point of view, at least point of hearing anyway, it's always, your voice is always going to add more to the group than a full band.
Yeah.
But it is almost impossible to know what your sound specifically does until you're on the podium.
Yeah.
Or until you're in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand the aspect of feeling small in band, but from the performer's chair, it's impossible to know how big you really are.
Yeah. And for you, having been in both band and choir, what was it? What was the difference that band really had?
I don't know if it's necessarily, because to me, it's to say that one is better would be creating a false dichotomy. Just because of different reasons, they've been around different amounts of times. There's different people who say one is better.
I just mean what your preference is.
But to me, it was definitely band because I felt like the range of emotions that the instrumentalists could find, especially, I mean, with all the differing timbres.
Sure.
It's a lot broader. A million times more broad, I feel like, than choir.
Yeah.
Because in choir, there's different effects you can do with your voice, sure, and then there's a million different kind of harmonies that you can do, especially in a 4-part choir. But when you start thinking about wind symphonies, and when you start thinking about specifically full orchestras, then the amount of things they can do is exponentially bigger. I feel like.
And was that always like something that was sort of driving you in band, or was that something more that you've realized the more that you've been learning?
I've realized it since, I would say, and it's, I think, almost everything that we do in the music building that is geared towards education is to make you have a better ear. An all-encompassing ear. And so you can't expect a high schooler to have that sense of judgment with as much musical experience as we had back then. But at the same time, I would say that was what was driving me back then was the camaraderie, and even though externally it was the actual relationships that I had with people and the actual, I mean, what I got out of it from whether it was just having friends or people who helped me out in life, people that were there for me, things like that. But I didn't come to know until I'd say maybe my junior or senior year that the actual music that came from it was something that I needed to have with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Okay, so you've also done, you and I have also done a lot of marching band. So, I mean, between the two, and especially, it being such an important part in half the year, which is your preference side? Do you prefer marching band over concert band, or what?
I prefer marching band, and it's kind of another tough answer, mainly because I prefer playing in concert band myself.
Yeah.
But it's like being in a football team, or it's like being in a going to summer camp and like doing all this team building, all these things that you do in marching band to be one cohesive group with a hive mind. It's
marching
amazing.
It's more like a sport.
Exactly. No, it's 100% a sport. I mean, when you really start analyzing everything that you do, from how tough your core has to be, to your glutes, to your quads, your hamstrings, your calves, obviously, and then going on to brass when you start thinking about your deltoids and your triceps and your lats. Or a drum major, you think about your traps, you think about also your triceps and your delts. Like, I've analyzed this stuff, and I tell my kids which muscles specifically they need to work on,
sure,
or focus that they're flexing while they're doing a certain thing. I do that with the drum majors and with the marchers. That amount of control, it's not a work that is lucrative like football, to where you lift weights and then you make that muscle bigger and be able to move more force. It's how you get cut, basically, what they say. You are refining that muscle to be able to do an action that is between here and here, and anything above is too much, anything below is too little, and a judge will see it.
Yeah.
So you have to fit inside that area, and it's hard to do. And people who are marching, people who are marching badly, they can easily get away with not working out any of their muscles. People who are marching well and they do so for 3 or 4 years, you can see the difference. You can see the difference in me. I was fat before marching band.
And there's a lot of people that I know that are like, oh man, I haven't been in shape since marching band or whatever. So, there's the sport aspect of marching band, the like collaborative, like team building effort of marching band that makes it so, I guess big feeling. But I mean, there's also like the performance itself is it's just a different experience. And I think that the pressure is different. Your role is low reads in being a tech, but what is the important aspect that you want kids to get out of marching band?
Well, that's hard to say, honestly. I do definitely want them to become better musicians. That goes without saying. I want them to find their own passion, really. I want to guide them into a passion for music itself, and not just the camaraderie, and not just the gang that they're with. But I want them to have some personal achievement that it's like that aha moment, like they realize on their own without anybody having to tell them that they did something better than they ever have before. And for them to kind of proclaim to themselves that from that point on they will never be below that standard. And I've seen that happen with kids, and that is I'd say that's probably my prime objective.
Yeah. And I think there's this big like sort of discussion going on, especially nowadays, just like with the arts, that why are arts being cut so much more than like sports, or well, what is it that from your point of view that kids really get out of the arts that they wouldn't get from sports or from English class or art, or not art class, but what is it that they get out of music and art and theater that they don't get anywhere else?
I can't speak for visual art because I've never really myself dived into it, but as far as any sort of stage work, whether it be acting, singing, playing, anything like that. Plato actually said something about this, and this is kind of where I got the whole concept of it from. Your brain is never as active as it is when you're performing, and I know that he was talking specifically about music, but I can see ways in which acting does the same thing. if we just try and lay out everything that your mind is going through when you're performing a piece of music, let's just start. Let's say I'm playing saxophone and it's in the key of B flat major. To me, it's going to look like the key of G major, which is going to have one sharp. So I'm going to have to keep in mind that while I'm playing this whole piece of music, the F is going to be sharp, which is 1, 2, 3 on the left hand and middle finger on the right hand. Also, you have to think about the time signature. You have to think about the tempo, and that at any time throughout the piece, these things may change either due to the piece demanding it or the group just doing so.
Yeah.
Which sometimes it does. If it's a group that's played together enough, they just decide to change something, and they all will. And that's mostly dynamic-wise or tempo-wise. And obviously, we're not just going to change the key out of... but you're thinking about all that. You're thinking about your also dynamic level. You're thinking about the 3 levels of hearing, which is yourself, people directly next to you, and then the whole band. You're thinking about your director and whether they're looking at you, whether they're looking at somebody else, whether there's something you can do through your musicianship to help whatever problem might arise. There's just a million things going on in your brain being a musician. And it's like I always tell my kids, you have a 1,000,000-item checklist. And you don't get to, this I did take from Susan, you don't get to go on autopilot.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sports where you can just go on autopilot. I myself like to swim, and swimming, you go on autopilot.
Yeah.
Until you have to turn around, hit the wall, and then turn around, and then you just go on autopilot because all it is stroke, 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 breathe, stroke, 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 breathe, stroke, 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 breathe. In, like, I imagine tennis, you can go on autopilot, and there's plenty of sports where you can go on autopilot, and your job specifically you can deteriorate a little bit, and especially in teams, it's not going to ruin everything.
Yeah.
In music, it will.
Yeah.
We have one shot, and I mean, just all those things specifically that everybody always talks about, as us musicians talk about, that make our art unique. It challenges the brain in a way that nothing else does. Statistically speaking, musicians are more likely to go to college. Musicians are more likely to stay in college. Musicians are more likely to have a higher GPA.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been well documented how much music can really help everything else. Now, it's obvious that the reason why we focus on sports is money, and the reason why we focus on the four core subjects is it's kind of an arbitrary kind of. It's a layover from the Cold War, basically. Because in the Cold War, we were trying to prove that we were better than Russia in those subjects, science and math specifically. We needed to be better than them in those.
Yeah.
Because that proved that we were just the better country.
Yeah.
And so that is the forefront of education and politics, although education isn't anywhere near the front of politics as a whole.
Yeah.
So whenever those core subjects are at the front of a subject that's at the back, then it makes us antagonize them. And I would rather us not antagonize those subjects.
Sure,
I would rather us try and stand behind the education system a little bit more and support it more, and sure, have the core subjects be the core subjects that everybody has to take, everybody needs to have a certain standard at, but also have some sort of art be required.
Yeah. I think Jesus, not on my podcast, but on one of his podcasts with one of his teachers, he had talked about how, for example, the psychology department, and there's like college level, but like the psychology department doesn't talk to the education department as much, even though the education, like the way the system is structured, needs psychology, but just completely ignores psychology. And so
what's funny is that it doesn't really, because a lot of my education classes have had a lot of psychology in the curriculum.
Yeah. Quick angry complaint. My developmental psychology doesn't count as a psychology class, and it really pisses me off. But like, more of what I'm mentioning is that like the ivory towers don't talk to one another.
No, they don't. And it's funny because they have to, obviously, being a psychology department at a school, you have to be able to be a good teacher to teach the psychology. And being a education department at a good school, you have to know psychology to be able to reach your kids.
Yeah, but even the psychology teachers are teaching the psychology via a system that the psychology itself that they're teaching is saying this is not effective.
Exactly.
And so I'm bringing that up because instead of just kind of making these domains of just here's math, here's science, here's history, here's English, here's music and art, kind of the way that it feels is that just once you go into the different room, once you go into the science room, you just switch all your other switches off and you just turn on your science brain. And that's just not true. You still need your science, math, and everything.
You need your math brain for music.
Exactly.
Obviously, you need your critical thinking in music. You need psychology in music. You need a lot of other aspects that are just, it's just that applied to it. You know what I mean?
And so to think that, we can just focus on one side without the other is just, rather than just being more of this and less of this, it just needs to be like improve everything, because everything improves the other.
Very true. And I mean that's what I've been saying for a long time, is that education needs to be really, it has to be the top priority. I don't see how we can really try to survive or try to have a future if we don't put a lot of importance on education. It's moronic, honestly.
Yeah.
It's nonsensical. There's no way that we're going to be able to have a good next generation without a good education.
Yeah. Although some people say that the next generation is a better show than the original. But yeah, no, definitely that there's a conflict of just priorities that we expect people to be better in certain regards without considering the source of why they would be better in certain regards in the first place. And so at least with education being an importance, what is it about, education to you that rather than just being a musician, but like being a music teacher, or rather than just being a music teacher, or
rather than just being a teacher, I want to be a music teacher.
Yeah.
Or what is that? Yeah. Well, I don't know. To be completely honest, I've considered being other kind of teacher before. And obviously I couldn't go on to be a conductor like my main dream is, but that's not, that doesn't take away the fulfillment that I get from teaching in general. There's just so much responsibility and so much that's being taken on, and it's taken for granted, and it's taken for granted by people in the field, and the field itself is taken for granted, because of how everything that happens to kids, especially the younger they are, it compounds on them, and it becomes so much bigger, and any good influence is so much fuel for them to become a good person, and any bad influence is so much fuel in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And we don't really take time to think about how much the little things affect the future. It's like the butterfly effect. We don't really focus so much on every little aspect of what we're doing, and it's not about scrutinizing teachers that much. It's about finding people who are really themselves thinking about it. I don't think we should be made sure, or nobody should be making sure that we are scrutinizing our every move, but I think we as teachers have to understand that.
Yeah.
Have to understand that everything we say to our kids is going to have some effect on them.
Yeah.
And that's why I look up to Brian so much, who's the director, Brian Cook, the director at Edmond North, because there's so much of what he does with kids that, and he's talked to me about it before. There's one specific kid who I think is on the autistic spectrum, is just always talking to somebody. He doesn't matter of rehearsal. He's just always talking. He's always trying to get somebody's attention. Always trying to make jokes. Always just a little bit too active. And it might be ADHD. It might be Asperger's. It's something, I think.
Sure.
But Brian always takes time to listen to him, because what does that kid have his whole life? People who get annoyed with him and tell him they're annoyed with him, and or try to be polite about it, but eventually just be rude or something like that. But Brian is always just happy to talk to him, happy to just super polite to him, and never snaps at him, nothing. Just always, all right, thank you, blank. Let's go ahead and get back to work, or something like that. Like just doesn't deter him necessarily, but refocuses him.
Yeah.
And lets him be himself. And that's so important, especially whenever we live in an era where individuality is so, at least on the outward side of it, it's, we want individuality to be a bigger thing, but as teachers we're taught to
make it all the same.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, that kind of thing, like, that has nothing to do with music. Like, giving respect to an attention-needing kid has nothing to do with music. But it has everything to do with how your children are raised, how everyone is raised, and that everyone has an impact on our next generation. And so, I guess, to bridge that into kind of more of what your personal beliefs are, what is the value to you of, like, kids, of teaching people? I mean, is it, like, to make the world a better place, or is it, like, because you like it, you know, blah, blah, blah?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, it is both of those, honestly. And those are probably the best ones I could really come up with, without so much of an ironic tang. But yeah, no, I do think that the teaching should be sought after as a way to improve the world. If you teach the next generation that wars are bad and that we really need to find our best way to solve problems without war, then obviously there's going to be less wars. Yeah. Why is it that we've had more and more wars exponentially since
exactly
the American Revolution? It's because we idolize it. Yeah. And you hear it all the time, parents that or kids who say that their parents fought in a war and are so proud of that war. And that's not to say that I think that we shouldn't respect those people who put their life on the line for the country, but at the same time, we should, as a society, view war as bad.
Yeah. And, I mean, because it is.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, this is like a silly question, but why do you want the world to be a better place? And I know that it sounds silly, but like for any other person, it could be, no, I don't care. I don't. Mm-hmm. Why do you want the world to be a better place?
Honestly, I'll take it here. I'll give you one of my biggest reasons. I don't believe in God, so there's nothing more. There's nothing after this. This is the meaning to my life. Is what I'm doing. I have no predetermined course. I'm just on this earth. I was a group of atoms that so happened to be in the area whenever my dad's sperm came around, I guess. And from then, I've just developed into what I am now, and I consider myself lucky for doing so. So I would very much like to leave some things better than I found them. And I know that's kind of a cheesy thing that people always say, but at the same time, I mean, if there's no afterlife, I don't see a point in not
making this better.
Exactly. When there's so much bad, especially, that's another reason. It's just there's too much crappy stuff in this world, and it's too easy to be another, I don't know, statistic, another negative.
And it's good that you would take that stance. I feel like there's this perception of like atheists that we just don't give a damn about anything,
right?
And that well, since nothing matters, well, I'ma just rape and kill everything
and eat babies. Yeah, I know, and it's funny because people tend to think that losing religion means that. I mean, obviously, if you lose religion, you had it at one point, and if you had it at one point, then you had the morality that comes with that religion, but you lose that religion, and you lose that morality.
That's the trend in thinking.
Yeah, exactly. That's what people see us as. They think that once we've lost that, we've lost our morality. We've lost that which guided us to atheism in the first place. Mm-hmm. It's... Yeah, a lot of it has to do with logic, a lot of it has to do with science, a lot of it has to do with facts. But at the same time, our morality wouldn't let us believe something that completely wants to destroy our morality.
Yeah.
That subconscious is still there.
Yeah.
Whether you want to call it God talking to you or whether you want to call it a part of your psyche, it's still there. You don't sever a part of your psychology by converting religions.
Yeah. I don't think I've specifically talked to you about this actually yet, but you and I were both Catholic. Mm-hmm. And the time that you had fallen out of religion was whenever I was still very much devoted. Mm-hmm. And so I never got the chance to truly understand what happened then.
Okay. I've told the story a million times. It's funny that I never told it to you. Well, you know what adoration is.
Yeah.
If your listeners don't, it's a practice in the Catholic Church when a relic that is believed to have been, I guess, touched by a saint or something, or a.
No, it has the Eucharist in it. The cross, the gold cross thingy, mm-hmm. That the priest don't touch with their bare mm-hmm, hands, mm-hmm. has the Eucharist in it. It has the piece of bread, basically.
By Christ. Okay.
In it.
Well, basically, that gets brought on stage, I guess, or to the front of the church, And then everybody just starts praying. They kneel. People celebrate or express it in different ways. And I remember them telling me that some people might start speaking in tongues and start shaking and stuff. And I know that religious people tend to tell me that this is no reason for me to have lost my faith, because just because God didn't talk to you then doesn't mean He's not going to talk to you later, or you can spend your whole life listening and whatever. Well, I didn't feel anything. I looked around and I felt absolutely nothing, and I tried. People say it's for lack of trying, and that honestly hurts my feelings.
Yeah.
It pisses me off because I wanted to. I really did, and past that point, it was whenever I started doubting. But I was practically an insomniac for about 6 months because I was praying every night. I wanted God to talk to me, and it took me a very long time to arrive at this point. But the God of the New Oral Testament can exist. I'm at a point. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm atheist right now. I would say that I'm definitely agnostic because I don't because I want to be Socratic about it mainly. But that God just, in my mind, my best conclusion is that God cannot exist.
Yeah.
It defies logic.
Yeah.
Because we say that He's supposed to be an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-everything being, and we have the whole Bible to show us that He is a petty little runt.
Sure.
And not just for that. There's just a lot of reasons for why I just don't believe that God could be it. And if I were to be introduced to another God or entity or whatever that could fit within the reality that has been shown to me in this universe, then I would take that possibility with a slightly bigger grain of salt.
Yeah. And so since there is no belief in God, what does drive your morality?
What I was taught, honestly, it's I would say that I do have a pretty Christian morality without necessarily. I mean, it's Christ-like, or I'd like it to be, and that's what I strive for. Really, it's the big pillars of most major religions.
Yeah.
It's treat others how you want to be treated. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't shoot. Don't cheat. Don't kill. Why did I say shoot? I don't know. Things like that. It's a common ground of morality for this society. Your religion does not decide that, and it's often seen as Christianity is often seen as the staple, and it mostly is, but it is just judged upon the society that if you're a good, upstanding person and I meet you on the street, you're most likely Christian. But it's obvious, being the melting pot that we are, that is not. Yeah. The two are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. So then, because I've tried really hard to connect what makes, not necessarily what makes, but like why these things are of value to me. I've tried from a very logical point of view, outside of just, well, it's just because my mom said so. And yes, my mom did say so, but like, I have looked for every logical reason to arrive at my conclusions, and that's why I value them. So I mean, okay, let me just drive to another bigger question, I guess. But whenever we were on the way to the brand new Modest Mouse concert, I brought up free will, mostly because I still am seeking a good discussion of that. But like, what is your view on free will so far, I guess?
To me, I guess the jury's still out. I like to say that there is no free will because I pretty strongly lean towards the multiverse. And it's I think a logical conclusion that if there are an infinite amount of universes with an infinite amount of possibilities, like I often say, my biggest example, and it's a little crass, I hope your readers will be okay with it.
Yeah.
There is literally another universe in which everything is the same, but one atom in my left testicle moves slightly to the left. Mm-hmm. Whereas in this one, it moved slightly to the right.
Exactly.
We are in the universe in which this exactly happens.
Yes.
Everything in the past is how it is in this universe, and there are an infinite amount of universes that have had that exact same past up to now. Mm-hmm. And there's an infinite amount that have the same until the very end, and then at the very end, there's slight, minute differences.
Yeah.
My testicle may decide some of those differences. But that being said, there is no stepping outside of the things that happen in this universe. There is no you deciding which universe you're in by having a different action, or even having a different thought. This is what's going to happen, and we are locked into it.
Mm-hmm. Which is, I mean, this devolves into the whole deterministic argument, but what reason then is there to, decide, Do we actually make decisions in that regard?
I mean, no, not really. When you think about the universe that it is, it's kind of a vicious cycle. If you can think yourself into circles, basically, doing this. But I would say no. Just because with the same multiverse thing, there is a universe where you decide everything else, and although you do have your reasons, that took you to this place.
Yes.
And because of those things that have happened, you are going to go one way in the forked road.
Exactly. It's what I think I described to you as the fourth dimensional approach rather than the fifth dimensional approach.
Right.
For those who don't know, this whole thing with like dimensions is that the fourth dimension is this universe's timeline, all the way from the beginning all the way up to the end, if there is a beginning or end, exactly in the way that it has happened and will happen.
And you're on a cart basically on that.
On that line.
Go back and forth.
And then the fifth dimensional approach is that every single intersection, every single decision, every single variation.
So every universe that has been the same before this, you can, from this point, go forward. Yeah, in different directions.
And so, sort of the deterministic approach is that the fourth dimensional line is just, this is the track we're on.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, you can't spend like 24 hours a day thinking this because you wouldn't be able to function. But how does that shape like who you are?
It doesn't. I mean, because there's a lot of there's a lot of things like that, potentially bright, potentially dark, that could turn me into a more negative person than I already am.
Sure.
And I would rather not do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, while it's not necessarily being ignorantly bliss, it's a chosen ignorance, I guess. Because I know about it, I just decide to not care, basically.
Yeah. And then another question that I bring up a lot is, what value is the human person to you, then?
The most of the known universe.
Why?
Because this doesn't happen. This collaboration of physical efficiency and psychological efficiency is not known to happen anywhere else. Mm-hmm. We are, as far as we know, alone in being able to think to the point that we can think, and being able to build, develop, and classify, and every verb.
Yeah.
There is nothing that can do as many verbs as we can.
Yeah. Except mantis shrimp. Those things are nuts.
But yeah, I mean, and with that thought in mind, I do a lot of times get really dark and think that it'd be better for the Earth if there weren't so many people on it. And I do think that's kind of undeniable, and part of me it gets even darker and says that it'd be way better for the Earth if there weren't so many stupid people on it.
Sure.
But at the same time, all those stupid people have such a strong capacity that just by being born on this Earth at this time, they have a bigger capacity than anybody before them. Mm-hmm. They can. I mean, even a starving child in Africa can find a way to not just prosperity but knowledge and become self-actualized.
Yeah.
And that really that should be the biggest goal. That it shouldn't. I think a human race that is focused on self-actualization would, without a doubt, let's say that if self-actualization became the top priority in the 1950s, by now people would be living on Mars. Then Mars would be terraformed.
Yeah.
Because there is so much potential here.
Yeah.
So the human life really, it's the most amazing thing that we know because of how much potential and capacity it has.
Yeah. And then, what direction would you like to see us go?
Well, I'll go back to the earlier topic because this is what I've told people before. Anytime I'm fighting political claims, because I don't side with either party, I say that education needs to be obviously the top priority. There is so much more that we can do if the people that take over 50 years from now have a higher standard. And I've told people this before, is that I don't think there's any better claim for societal improvement than having a rule where each generation's educational standard has to be higher than the generation preceding it.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that social, like, if that were just a standard, if that were just set, and that's just how we knew we did it, can you imagine how much further we can get in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years?
And there's no reason why it shouldn't. like we're learning more things.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Exactly.
able to learn more
Exactly.
things than we've ever been.
And the smartest of us are so way beyond just the average of us.
Mm-hmm.
And not even to mention the lowest of us. So whenever you start imagining a world in which everybody
Mm-hmm.
is at least average, our average then becomes in between.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It gets so much higher because then the smarter ones than average are able to have more numbers, really. It's easier to get to that higher level.
Mm-hmm.
Once, I mean, learning is exponential. You don't...
Yeah.
I mean, you learn what 2 plus 2 is, and then past that point, each step becomes harder, but at the same time quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And you can expand so much in so little time, the more you keep going.
Yeah. And I always sort of make this joke about, because I say the same thing, like, we need to make the world a better place through education, through making everything sustainable, through all these things. And so I'm a musician. That's my joke, because, you know, seemingly, at least societally or whatever, the perception of value that musicians have in society is not anything relative to what, you know, an engineer or a scientist does.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, what is it that we can do through music that can shape the world that way?
Really just interest more people.
Yeah.
Just make it more of a popular art.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't just have to be classical music, although I usually hate band programs that succumb to the pop culture. I understand the idea behind it, and I don't completely deny the possibility of me maybe having a pop culture show somewhere in the future.
At least Radiohead.
Maybe Radiohead. Either way, it's something. Whatever will get the butts in the seats, as they say.
Yeah.
And then from that point on, hope that you can challenge them intellectually to seek out not just more of that specific kind of side of the art form, but also more of the art form's origins. And really, I don't believe that there's a single human being that couldn't listen to, I don't know, Serenade No. 1 by Dvorak and not be amazed, or Appalachian Spring by Copland and not be amazed, or what I've been playing lately, Molly on the Shore by Granger. There's just so much to that. Although, be it an old art form, it's still, as many people say, and no, not just classical musicians, but a lot of people say that era in music was the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because it was a less watered down art form.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays it's become pretty hackneyed. Not to say that there aren't some good ones nowadays, but a majority of what you saw back then was a lot more well thought out, a lot more cathartic.
Sure.
Definitely. Than it is now.
And then I guess closing thoughts. What advice do you have for people, if anything, that they should take away from at least what you have to say?
Well, it's really not too far from your mantra, and it's cool because I remember when you first told me about it. I remember it being something that I've kind of thought through myself. At least your first pillar is that I might be wrong. I never really thought about it that way specifically. I never really told myself that's kind of that was my mantra, that I might be wrong. But I've always gone into any sort of experience with that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important to do. Also, to seek out different pleasures in life. I think there's too much to experience for people to say that they are. Well, it's kind of like what my mom says. She doesn't have a favorite kind of music. She just says she likes good music.
Yeah.
And that's how I am too. For the longest time, I said I didn't like country, but there is some country that I like.
Mm-hmm.
And I suggest, or I urge people to find the best in everything, and to find the not just the music, but the everything that truly makes you happy, regardless of its category or its or whoever made it or anything like that.
Yeah. Be the best people you can be. And then at this point, it's normally plugging things, but you don't really have like a public thing that you can really plug.
Come check out the Meat Market Refectory. I work there mostly on the weekends. You can come see Edmund North, Marching Man, at the UCO Stadium, probably most Friday nights until November. Although contests are better, but if you want to go to contests, I would say just look that up online.
Yeah. Plus, you can also see all the other great marching bands.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's OBA this year?
Broken Arrow.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that definitely I would want to plug that, because that Sen's finals is over. You know that Blue Coats won, right?
I didn't.
In drum corps, yeah, it's the first time they ever won, so that's cool. But Sen's drum corps is over, then that's probably the highest form of marching arts that you can see is high school marching band now.
Yeah.
But I would urge people to go and see drum corps, because there's no bigger epitome of what I was trying to describe with the focus that it takes and the fiscal demand that it takes. There's no higher example of that than drum corps.
Yeah. Plus, it's just really badass.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool as hell. It is.
Yeah, and I'm Santiago Ramones. You can find my stuff, my Twitter, Santiago R_music, same as my Instagram. And everything else that I do is on my website, santiagoramones.com, including this podcast. And then I always end with my 3 things, which is love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong. Thanks for listening.